Hello, everyone. My name is Codiak, and welcome to the first episode of our Hytale Roundtable series, where I bring in my friends from around the Hytale community, pick a topic, and talk about whatever is on our mind. And today, I'm very excited to have on Connor from Kweebec Corner.
Hello.
ThirtyVirus.
What's up, guys?
And TheLividLion.
How's it going, guys?
So I wanted to start this series talking about adventure mode. It's one of the pillars of Hytale, and there's a lot of discussion. So let's kick it off with the first question. Quests. Now, they're a natural part of the open world adventure game kind of ambiance, but how do you guys see quest systems working in Hytale? And Livid, I want to start with you.
Oh boy. All right. So a quest, like the biggest thing that has interested me actually about Hytale is, aside from just the customization of building and everything, is the actual quest system to give the world a lot more, vibrance and activity than what we would experience in normally like Minecraft, right? For instance. And I'm hoping, like what I expect quests to be, is that there is like dedicated, I wouldn't say like a structured mission, but more of like a loosely like you go here and there's kind of like traps and activities within like these dungeons that are like tiered kind of content where they kind of get harder as you go. And as you get towards like the end of said quest or whatever, you are rewarded with something powerful or something that's uniquely structured towards that section of the world, like something you won't be able to find in other places. So I'm hoping there's like unique weapons or armor or like perks on these kind of things that you can't find aside from doing these kind of quests. So that's what I'm hoping to get from that sort of thing.
And it's interesting, and actually part of our survey, we talked about the adventure mode experience. And one of the things that I brought up was that when I do quests, like I'm a big World of Warcraft guy. I came from the kind of the MMO world. Quests, like you do the quest, you get the reward, and then you forget about it 5 minutes later. How is Hytale going to make these quests like actually mean something to the player?
Yeah, that's definitely a difficult thing to do, especially when you're structuring it from a more of a sandbox point of view.
Yeah.
Because when we have, a game like World of Warcraft or Elder Scrolls, like there's a big overarching story. And I know the Hytale is setting themselves up to also have that kind of lore, but whether or not they deliver that in a nice, digestible manner that you can really get invested in it is the question. Because we've seen a lot of like concept art and everything so far that has really interested me into the lore of the game, but how they choose to actually implement it into the game that's digestible, that's the bigger picture for me. Because I know they have a compendium that they have all their master lore behind, and there's supposed to be like lore pages that we can read. But I think the biggest thing for me is when that is actually portrayed like in the game physically, and that's what really gets people invested. So if the missions or quests aren't structured in a way that it like really ties in cohesively with that story, it might not be as impactful, and remembering to the player.
So here's my thing, right? Just picking up off that. The whole focus that's been around story in the community recently, like there is a lot of story and, sort of the solo sort of end game and the mission and things like that. I'm very interested as well in the diversity they want to bring to the sandbox game mode, right? So I want quests that can offer unique rewards that they're not like about getting through the progression of the game. Some quests might offer just unique rewards that are very rare, that might just be interesting vanity items, right? I've been playing Terraria a lot recently because that game's been updated, and there's been so many new items added to that game, and there's so many possibilities and different effects that can be done. I want to see quests that give rewards that aren't just progression based, but are also like perhaps like achievement based, right? You want to achieve them because they're so perhaps rare or hard or difficult to some sort of semblance of an achievement system within the quest.
I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, 30, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're taking a good step with balancing the whole idea of having, say, a dungeon that you would adventure in. You go from point A to point B, like start to finish, instead of like, I know one thing in Minecraft that was a big issue was where you could just dig through the walls and just get to the end. I think you confirmed with your interview with Noxie that walls are unbreakable in these dungeons, right?
In boss fights specifically, that's what he was talking about, but yes.
Okay, yeah. So that's a good start, I think. But there's going to be some other aspects that, I mean, with rewards especially, I do think, along the lines of what you were saying earlier, with the different combinations of different items and effects, I think it would be cool to have something, for example, like, I don't know, using a spell to heat up a sword to do extra damage or something. Or maybe like having that ability with some special item. Maybe it would be like an attachment for a sword that would, light it on fire or something.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that could be
a quick thing to just bring up on Quest as well is like some sort of reputation system. There's so many races, and there seems to be so many like settlements and stuff. It would be really interesting to see like quests that are, race based, or stuff like that can increase your reputation with a specific, the Kweebecs or the Trorks or stuff like that, where you can choose something.
Yeah, I think I'm a big Fallout fanboy myself. I don't know if anyone here's played New Vegas, especially, but there's a lot of aspects from that game that, I mean, I don't know if it necessarily fit Hytale, but there's a lot of cool stuff. For example, reputation. I think as far as loot's concerned, it'd be a good idea to have a currency as well. So, like, not just emeralds trading with villagers, but like actual coins, I think.
Like, even different currencies for different races. That would be quite interesting.
That would be interesting.
Almost like an economy, like within the game.
But yeah, I think an economy would be important too. It adds stuff to have as loot. Same goes for a lot of different food items. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to me, especially because I'm a huge like PvP player too. When it comes to games like sandbox open world games, that they can implement that in survival and stuff. And if that's the case, where there would be multiple currencies and stuff like that, that really becomes a really easily focusable point for like conflict and stuff. Being able to have like banks and systems operating on servers, and for factions to have whole vaults of like different currencies and stuff locked off for different things, and all the trade that becomes, like this faction is more reputable with Quebecs, and this one's more reputable with Slavians, and so you want to ally with different ones depending on your interest in that world and stuff like that. So like that could be very interesting if they did.
It's so interesting, because one of the things, I got a lot of flack because I came over, not really knowing that much about Hytale when I started doing content for it, and started throwing around a lot of MMO jargon, because that's the world I came from. And people were kind of giving me pushback like, oh, this isn't an MMO, it's a sandbox, it's different. Okay, yes, I hear you. I hear that, but there are so many elements that I think they are trying to at least flavor with that kind of MMO feel. A whole deep quest system and lore system is seriously rooted in, World of Warcraft, EverQuest Online. Like, that's where it comes from. Like, granted, yes, games like The Witcher 3, they have these deep, kind of RPG lore backstory elements, but like when you're trying to do that in a massive multiplayer setting, that's a big challenge. And then specifically when I was talking to Noxie, he was like, everything has to be achievable solo. I mean, this is a crazy task for this team to pull off. Bosses that you can beat solo but are also engaging, an entire world and economy system that you can, it can be interesting as a massive group of people but also engaging solo. It's an enormous feat. I just don't know how they're going to pull it off.
Again, I'd like to point to something like Terraria, where they have managed to achieve something like that, where they have a dynamic system where you can utilize multiplayer and single player to enjoy the game and experience the different. And I think it's important to touch on that fact of like the whole Minecraft derivative idea of Hytale, right? It's not. It's so many more things, right? You can see so many things in this game. You can see inspiration from games as far back as like 20 years ago, right? It's incredible. It's insane.
I think that's the reason why people are excited, though, right?
Exactly. It brings back that nostalgia.
They see a bit of their favorite game like from all across. One thing I wanted to mention though is like, I'm curious how Hytale's going to prevent their dungeons from basically becoming like an amusement park ride. Like where you see the first person come in and then you hear like the animatronics like play and then you like it's your turn and then you walk in and it feels like some sort of like funhouse or something. Like I don't know how they're gonna prevent that.
Yeah. I mean,
not only that, but like the issue that a lot of MMOs run into in the beginning too, where they become like farms, and you find like groups of players that just camp a location and they just completely kill the boss over and over and over until they get the drop they want, and then
Yeah.
players who aren't as fortunate with that instances, right? Like I know ESO had a big problem where it was hard to even find the bosses you needed to loot from because there was groups of players just farming sections, and you couldn't find one yourself.
Well, instance dungeons would be the answer to that, right? So you could go into a dungeon. I mean, they've already talked about their kind of
Right.
portal dungeons from the concept art, but that's how you would get around that. You know, you would go in as solo. You know, we could go in as 4 individuals, but we could also bring in a small team and do the same content. Wouldn't have to worry about anybody else. But that's where you start to run into that issue of isolation. You know, do you want people to organically run into each other, or do you want them to be able to just kind of do their thing? If they're on an online server, do you want them to have to compete, or do you want them to be able to fully experience your game? That's a big question.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be pretty demanding as well.
Yeah.
Having to load a new area for each team that walks in, and then it'd just be a whole bunch of them. Like just yeah.
But I mean, that's what games, in terms of the MMO land, that's what World of Warcraft dungeons are. Yeah. That's what Rift dungeons were. That's what, it's an instance dungeon.
Rift dungeons.
Yeah, there you go. Throwing it back to Rift
in a while.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody actually plays that game anymore. But I'm just kind of pulling a question out of thin air here. I'm not a huge Terraria guy, but I've played Terraria enough to know kind of the systems and kind of what it does well, what it doesn't do well. People have been looking for this kind of story RPG element to the game in an adventure mode. Does Terraria do that well? Does Terraria check all those boxes? Does it satisfy kind of the person who's interested in story?
So I think Terraria is very much it's more open. It's a case of you have a progression system where you're building up NPCs and you're from easier bosses to hard mode bosses. Right, so there is like an end game and there is like a technical end boss, right? But the end goal is infinite still. There's no like exact story mode or anything to that. So it would be interesting to see if there was a combination of the two. That would be very interesting.
Either you guys have any other experience with Terraria?
Nah, I have like 2 hours in the game.
Yeah,
well,
I'm in the same boat.
I don't have too much experience. I've just been playing it recently because I used to play it back in the day when it first came out, of course. But I saw that they had this huge update, and that's what drew me to the game again. Like I haven't played it in so long, but they had all these new items, all these crazy new functions. It felt more like the world that Hytale is offering, right? Rather than this basic sandbox game that we've expected from Minecraft, which is why I'm so excited for this game.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of things that people can put. You could come from the MMO world. You can come from the single player RPG world. You can come from the sandbox world. You're going to be able to latch onto something. At least that's what I've, what we've all been working on in our content. That's what we can see, right? There's going to be a little bit of something for everybody. But we were talking about dungeons before a little bit. Let's talk about bosses for a second. I'm a huge boss guy, and just we put out a new survey, and one of the questions was about bosses. And so I've already started to see answers about like, I want epic bosses that drop epic loot. Okay, that's great. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. You guys have all probably had those memorable bosses in your video game experiences. What's going to make, and 30, we'll start with you. What's going to make bosses in Hytale successful?
One thing they're going to have to do for sure is avoid just having, say, an upgraded version of a normal mob that just has a ton of health and that's it.
Yeah.
I think the idea of weak spots and patterns is good. Oh, sorry about the audio quality, by the way. Peter just turned on. But it may sound funny. One of my childhood games that I just adore is SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom.
Oh my god, that's so good.
It had the most creative boss fights I've ever experienced in any game.
Yeah.
And it just... there were always weak points, and it was generally pretty obvious because it was, a kid's game. But I could see a system where, there were very fun and predictable patterns. I'm going to use, for example, there's all the bosses are big robot versions of the main characters. So one of the most memorable ones, in my opinion, was Patrick. He was in a toxic waste dump area, and the entire area, if you touched any toxic waste, you got hurt. And it'd be like a liquid, and the levels would rise and fall, and there'd be staircases where you can, there's multiple levels that you can fight on, and he would I'm trying not to ramble on. He would have multiple attacks, one of which where he would spin around and launch goo at you and attack you, and there'd be other scenes where he's going going for a big charge up attack, and then every time his back would get exposed and you could hit it, and like 3 hits he's dead. Sort of.
Okay. Yeah, it's that
I
kind of.
remember that very well.
Okay, yeah. So,
the thing.
so
the
I
thing-
think that's
Go ahead.
I think that's the way bosses could be done. Although it might be a little too easy,
Okay.
but I think it's the most fun because just whacking at something for a half an hour isn't really fun to me.
Yeah,
No,
if I'm just
definitely
whacking at something, no, I'm done. I'm done. I mean, honestly, and this is where I was started to get worried. When I was playing WoW, I was doing a lot of boss guide stuff and boss content stuff, and Noxie said that we're gonna have to be able to beat these things solo, and that concerns me because there's only so much complexity you can put into a fight when you have to do it solo. So like part of
I don't know if that's entirely true.
well, tell me how I'm wrong. Come on.
Dark Souls, good example.
Okay.
Like
That's true.
the bosses have they have predictable patterns, but they mix them up enough that there's enough mechanics within an encounter how you fight the boss that you can still do it solo. It becomes you learn how that boss works and fights.
But is
And
that
you
a
kind of adapt to
strategy
that.
or is that more of reactionary? I was watching our guy on our team, Sang, playing Sekiro last night. It's a lot of reactionary stuff. Like, can you dodge at the right time? There's no real strategy to that. It's can you develop the skills to dodge or roll or maneuver? I'm talking about a serious strategy. Whether it be kind of critical thinking, like in a World of Warcraft fight where you have to kind of split apart your teams and deal with a certain number of mobs on either side. Obviously, you're just not going to have that opportunity, and they can't develop fights around that because the idea is that the base player, one player, should be able to beat that content. I just wonder how they're going to do that.
I think it essentially comes to the priority of what you want boss fights to be in the game, right? Like overall content, whether you want the roleplay elements, the races, all the other quests and stuff on top of bosses. If you want bosses to really stand out, you want them to make them hard. If you want to make them obstacles in the game for progression, then you want that difficult, complex routine that players want to learn and be able to tackle in different ways. And you want them to be able to have to learn to get past that progression obstacle, right? But if you just want them to be more of an achievement-based thing, just like a bragging right sort of thing, or like a part of the story, it might not necessarily progress you in the story. It might just give you more detail in the story, or any form of information. But I think doing that sort of expands the options that you have with what bosses can be, essentially. Because again, I know I'm bringing it back to Terraria again, but they have many come about in all different forms. You can do all sorts of things from events can spawn bosses to you using a certain item can spawn a boss, or you going to a certain section of the world can spawn a boss. Like, they're different. It depends how you want to categorize bosses in the game, I guess.
I actually have an extra thought on this. Like, if I had to pick my favorite type of boss fight, instead of taking a lot of hits and then finally going down, I think it'd be best. And my favorite experience is when it's hard to get a hit, but when you do, it does a lot of damage. So, like,
That's good, yeah.
yeah, and that's where I was going with that.
Yeah, I think your point before though about the normal mob turning into some sort of elite mob, like they've got to move away from that. Now, granted, we don't know. We've seen what we've seen in the trailers and the concept art, but we don't know what their full range of bosses is, right? We've seen a lot of Zone 1 content.
Right.
We've seen some bosses or quote unquote bosses in the trailer. We don't know how they're, like, Connor was saying, we don't know how they're going to fit into the overall picture of the game. But one thing is for certain, right? You kill a boss, you're going to get some sort of gear. And this kind of brings us back to the conversation before about gear being relevant. We're talking about doing quests. Are those quest rewards going to be the same as those boss rewards, or are they going to be on different plateaus? Where are they going to say this is the best gear you can get? Is it in bosses? Is it in dungeons? Is it in PvP? Is it in quests? That's another challenge they're going to have. We've already seen the different common, uncommon, rare, epic, and legendary. We know there's tiered rewards, just like a lot of MMOs and RPGs. So where are they going to put the best stuff? Because that's going to cause a lot of tension in the community, right? I can't get to this. I don't have a team to do this. But that's a really hard thing that they're going to have to kind of figure out.
I think it's gonna. Yeah. I think a good game should have a system where it's like you can't define a best weapon. You could maybe define a best play style weapon combination, So maybe people that spend a lot of time out plundering dungeons would prefer a weapon that is better suited for PvE. Whereas maybe if you're back at home and you're, doing the Skyrim, making, weapons at home, so that would be better suited for PvP, right? So maybe if you progress down a certain path, you get gear that better helps you in that path or that category of gameplay.
Right.
It's an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys have any thoughts
Yeah,
on
that's
that?
interesting. It's like I think also trying to balance the appeal between the casual and the hardcore player base is always a big point of contention in
Oh, yeah.
most games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and people who are actually like really hardcore players that play X amount of hours a day, that kind of thing, and they want rewards and challenges that are at that really high pinnacle point that often a lot of the time casual players don't even have time to attempt. Because like if you look at things like I play a lot of Destiny, I play Division, stuff like that. There's a lot of end game content that I know that there's a lot of people that I end up having. I help carry them through certain experiences because they never get to experience this on their own solo. Like they have to find groups to experience this kind of content. And while that's like kind of a good thing and a bad thing, like you meet a lot of new people, friends, you have good experiences and all this kind of stuff through it. It also segments, your player base like a huge amount.
I think there's one huge overlooked factor that comes into all of this. It's been around since gaming began. Minecraft got it perfectly right, and that's difficulty. And the ability to change difficulty, alter the settings of how your world works. We've already heard from Hypixel that you can change anything in the world, right? You can customize the settings, you can customize various items and stuff. So what is the likelihood of them offering a single player that can be altered in various ways, right? You could start a world, you could create your own world and choose its difficulty. You could choose the difficulty of your own player, whether your player drops loot when it dies, whether the player completely dies when it dies, hardcore mode, say, in some cases.
Definitely.
That is a huge factor that could dictate all of those things, bosses, quests, the rewards that you get from them.
Yeah, and one of the things that for me, when I, think about preparing for a raid, new raids coming out of World of Warcraft, my idea is that I need to gear up so that I can match that big challenge. There may not be one of those big challenges. I may not need to gear up for anything in Hytale because obviously there's no raids, there's no 40-man raids, there's no 20-man raids, there's no like pinnacle challenge, if you will. It's more horizontal. If I want to go to, the deep ocean, maybe there's a way that I need to kind of progress to get to that point, but it's not necessarily going to impact anything else that I do, right? There aren't going to be, it's not going to be Codiak's team versus TheLividLion's team versus ThirtyVirus' team versus Kweebec Corner's team trying to beat this raid first. It's just going to be, This is what they're focusing on today. They want to go to the deep ocean. They want to make a farm. And this is where the progression conversation gets kind of funky because we don't know what the end game is. When we, Livid, you were talking about Destiny and Division 2. Like there is a very clearly defined end game.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't know about Hytale. We've heard about, obviously there's a few of the biomes that are still questions. We don't know what they are. We've talked about the deep ocean and things like that. We automatically in our heads being, video game fans that understand what end game is, that's where our brain goes. But we don't know. There may not be an end game. That may not be a thing in Hytale.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so pressed on an end game if it wasn't for the fact that they're advertising such a story to the game, and collectible and tiers of weapons. When you start introducing that kind of thing, it really leads you to believe that there is an end game, and until we really hear news about what that is, that is definitely a point of worry for me if it's going to hold me in that kind of like experience, or if I just have to join a community server that creates that sort of experience. So
see, it's a blurry line because once you start defining things like the backstories to race and the reason why they're called certain things or wear certain things or do certain things, you're instantly adding backstory. Everyone's suddenly going to have questions about all of that stuff, and you can't expect people to not ask questions about that. It's the fundamental of storytelling. It's the fundamental of all games. There has to be a story. How deep you go with that is optional. You could have a set end game where you finish the game and you progress and you finish, but but you could evolve that over time. You could have seasonal changes to the game. You could have, daily changes to how the game functions and how the progression can alter. You could do so many things with that. Yeah.
I think it would be cool if there was like a seasonal quest or a seasonal story where, like, for example, 4 months there would be a brand new thing that is available to all players or something. I mean, it
Almost
wouldn't
like
be as
Fortnite
sustainable, but it would be really cool.
Yeah, I
I'd be
mean,
interested to see how they would implement something like that.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
from the MMO background, it's, again, I go to World of Warcraft because there's so many elements that are directly like comparable, but it's wintertime. We know it's Christmas time. They're going to put a quest hub out where the quests are all, Christmas themed or seasonal themed. Like, yeah, it's been done. And it's nice. And I think a lot of people that are coming are specifically sandbox world people would really appreciate something like that. We already saw they had that post during the holidays where there was a Merry Christmas theme to it. So we know they're thinking that way. These guys aren't, they're smart developers. They see, they know what everybody wants from every different world. And that's why I think they're being so careful. Like, we're all covering blog post content, things like that. It's a drip. I mean, granted, the music stuff this week is great. It's fantastic. It's great. But I mean, we're talking about tiny details every single week that are helping us paint this bigger picture. But I think the biggest and most exciting thing is that we're all coming from different worlds. We've brought up Terraria, we've brought up Minecraft, we've brought up World of Warcraft. We're coming from very different worlds, and I think they're all going to converge on Hytale. And I think that puts a lot, obviously, what is the trailer? 45 million views. Puts a lot of pressure on that team to get it right. And adventure mode, we're talking about one specific thing, adventure mode, which is, kind of the RPG role-playing element of it. We're not even talking about the PvP aspect of things, which, we'll get into on another episode, things like that. The creation aspect of things. This is a game that is truly all things to all people, and no game has pulled that off yet. The bar
I think we
is
should
high.
we should be careful though.
Yeah,
We would want to avoid what I would like to call No Man's Sky syndrome.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if any of you guys remember, but for me, I thought it was going to be the game to end all games, where it'd be like, its own universe. You'd be able to do whatever you want, and then it fell on its face. I mean, Hytale has a lot more potential than that because, we've seen it firsthand with the blog posts and stuff, but we should not be, to the moon with what we expect is going to be in the game right off the bat.
I agree. Being from Hypixel and being from, it's almost like a second generation game, right? Like, it's come from another game's success, or not success, but it's grown its roots and its audience in another game, right? It's like a second generation sort of thing where these people that are making these games have grown up with. They've experienced all these things. They've experienced the annoyances that we're going through. Like, these guys have watched games fall and rise, like No Man's Sky. They've experienced that, gamers' lust for new and entertaining products. So they surely must understand, and perhaps that is why they are drip feeding us such little content and so many little details, is perhaps they understand why and how valuable that information is, knowing that each piece is confirmed, right? Maybe that is almost a semblance of what we can expect. We can, every tease is like almost a confirmation of something really exciting that is going to be in the game.
Yeah, and for sure, we don't want it to be No Man's Sky. But No Man's Sky, and to their credit, they took a huge hit right off the top. But they worked hard. They put their nose down, probably wasted a lot of money redeveloping that game. And they're just coming out with a brand new, huge multiplayer update to the game. Granted, I think the four of us can all agree we don't want Hytale to flop. We want it to be a huge success. We all want something out of the game. And they could be
running.
Yeah, we want to hit the ground running. We all want to start making content. We want to play the game, obviously. But it's hard to not talk about these things when it's such, it's a drip of information. We kind of, and from all of our channels, we don't speculate that much. We talk about the ideas we have in our heads, but again, we're coming from such different worlds. And I think that they use each of these blog posts, and I really do think the teams look at how the community reacts to them. Like, okay, are we on the right track? Are we in the right vein? We talked about No Man's Sky. I also brought up Atlas to Noxy. Atlas was, there is a community of MMO players that want a game like this. There's a community of sandbox players that want a game like this. There's a community of RPG players that want a game like this. Again, that bar is so high. But I have another question for you guys. Last 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the Sony, I'm trying to remember, Boundless is what the game was. You guys hear that game?
I have not.
Yeah.
Okay, so Boundless was another kind of sandbox, kind of voxel-based creative game. And my question is, why are we drawn to Hytale? What made it so successful that 45 million people watched that trailer and are now part of this? Granted, our subreddit and what we, the content we're creating is for a smaller group of people, but there is a buzz about it. What was it about Hytale that resonated with people? Anybody can jump in first, because I kind of just threw this one out of thin air. But there's something, right? There's something that brought us to the table.
I think there's a lot of things. One thing people wanted to change, currently, or what they had seen before. They wanted something new, something that, like you said, offers to and caters to multiple people on different platforms and, from different back. I think another thing that they probably want to touch on is, I've lost my train of thought, but you get what I was going with that first one.
Yeah.
I've got
you can go.
I've got a bit of something too. I think it's familiar, but better. As great of a game as Minecraft is, I don't want to compare it as being Minecraft 2, but I'm getting somewhere with this. It's that Minecraft had so many good things that were going for it, but a lot of areas where it fell flat. For example, the economy with the villagers, and it was really lackluster. And then you'd have things like PvP, where connection and an open client just completely ruin the experience for a lot of people because of hacking and connection and people that, I don't know if you guys do on Hypixel at least, but I know for a fact when someone's lagging, they have what I call discount reach and anti-knockback because they take delayed knockback and get crazy hits. So it's like there's a lot that is left to be desired with a game like Minecraft. And for example, like with Hytale, things are more detailed, so you get a lot more creative freedom when designing something like a weapon or a character, and being able to use the model maker to insert like objects into blocks and having these smooth like animations like opening the door and simple things like seeing a book stick out of a bookcase. And there's like all these little details that refine on the original concept of the voxel based sandbox RPG like PvP experience. Like all of that, as much as I don't want to say Hytale is Minecraft 2, I think it's again familiar but better.
It sounds ridiculous.
I think a lot of people like it.
It sounds ridiculous, but like one thing that got me excited about it was for years and years in Minecraft and similar games, I've always wanted the ability to change the form of a block, right? Make it slanted or make like a cornerstone or like cut it into halves and stuff. And just that tiny little detail in some of the trailer footage is all it took for me to just like I've seen it in other survival sandbox games before. I've seen that be done and attempted, but it's something about this game, like the core of it, the fact that it's built by Hypixel people, Minecraft players born and bred. I see that there is some intention behind this that like I've always wanted, I've always desired that, and it just feels right. Something about it just feels like, they're getting everything right. They're doing things pretty much spot on at the moment. Yeah.
To piggyback off all that, for me, I think it's definitely, and a lot of my friends as well that have really drawn interest in it, is there's a sense of, I want to say, nostalgia. Like, for instance, like a lot of us, like we stopped playing Minecraft like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Some of us occasionally pick it up to see like what the kind of stuff they add and stuff like that, right? But there's like a leap. Like we've gone on to experience a lot of other kind of games and systems that things have implemented. And then we see a crisper version of like these building systems, and just like the environment is lush, like it's alive. Like I think humans from a certain standpoint, like we crave structure to a certain point, and even though this is a sandbox, they're making it in a kind of structured way that you still have the ability to be as creative and free as you want to do in that environment. but there's enough stuff that kind of also guides you on the experience that you want to enjoy.
Right. Those
You know,
prefabs,
so there's a lot of stuff
those things, those
there's a lot of
elements
stuff
that they can
engages.
just put in the world to engage with, but yet you're still free to do whatever you want.
Exactly. You know, there's a lot of stuff that caters to the adventurer. There's stuff that caters to the people that really love building. You know, just that all those, like you mentioned, those little details, just being able to make the block instead of just, you know, a stair block for furniture. Now there's furniture that you can put in your house. Like for the longest time, I don't know how many times I want to say, I wanted to make a house and sit down in it in Minecraft, and you just couldn't.
The
You know,
staircase,
Stairs
the
and signs.
2 signs. Yeah.
exactly.
And
then
if
if
you want to
you
be
put
real
2
fancy, you stick a
staircases, you make a
minecart
couch.
underneath.
Yeah, you know, so there's just, you know, a lot of stuff that people crave to do that was just, you know, it was never implemented, and it's just stuff that we really want to experience, and it comes from those people who are passionate about it and have wanted to do those things that they went, you know what, let's do it. And I think that's the biggest thing that drives people to it. There's just the visual appeal and the stuff that we felt we've been missing.
Yeah, the structure thing is a really interesting argument. And I totally agree with you. You know, we crave this kind of, I want to be free. I want to do whatever I want to do. But yet sometimes when you are faced with that, you don't know what to do. And so having
There's
those
so
kind
much
of,
to do.
you know what I mean? So when the possibilities are endless, you almost kind of get frozen and because you don't, there's too much. It's too daunting of an idea.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm not.
go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm not fearful of, I guess, the overall game loop being bloated, right? I feel like they're smart enough where they can balance things, they can maintain the economy of things, make sure it's not too, overwhelming to the player where they join and there's like 1,000 items they can craft all of a sudden from gathering like 1 piece of wood and like 2 sticks or something, or 5 stone. I think they definitely want to build up some sort of. I think they want to build up some sort of learning system, right? I mean, Minecraft, yeah, the crafting system was very rudimentary and easy to understand, but it seems like Hytale are going more the route of you have to have these certain materials. So you have to know where to find those materials. You have to know where to find those crafting recipes. You have to progress, right? So you're not going to start by being able to make all of these things. You're going to have to learn to do these things and pick it up. It's like a whole new system. Which, like, one thing for me with all of these survival and sandbox games is the recipes. Like combining what you get, not knowing everything. Like I play Minecraft now, I can craft everything. I can do everything I want to, and I don't think a second about it. I want that experience again of going back into a game and being like, oh, this and that, like a bit of iron, a bit of like maybe 3 emeralds, like crafts this crazy item. Like I want that like achievement and lust for designing things again and crafting things and making new things.
Well, it's interesting you brought that up. I'm gonna throw something crazy out there. One of the respondents in our survey was talking about that same idea, that kind of freedom to create kind of organically. But we also talked about difficulty. And so one of the ideas that we saw in the survey was this idea that if you're playing and you're not looking for that sort of freedom, you're looking for a little bit more structure. You had recipe books that you could find in the world or some sort of system that would guide you along that path. Whereas somebody like you, Connor, would maybe want nothing. You want no hand-holding. You want pure discovery all the time. And again, you're taking the idea of crafting and splitting it to the casual fan, as Livid said before, or the hardcore fan. And that is always going to be a challenge. Kodiak may not be the best crafter in the world. He may need some help. How is he going to get it? But 30, he's a pro. He doesn't need any help. Do you think they're going to kind of tier that or break that apart? Or do you think everybody's going to have that kind of same platform?
I think from the get-go, I think no matter what they do from the very beginning, you're going to get that experience of discovery, right? In the very beginning. Because nobody knows what we're doing when we start playing. And I think an example, I don't know if any of you have played Rust before.
Very little.
A little bit.
The way they do their crafting system nowadays is there's like a blueprint system. You find blueprints and you'll go out, you'll break open this barrel or this box or you get through this puzzle to get into, right? And you get a blueprint that you've been looking for this weapon or for this piece of material to build this base. And once you find that blueprint, you learn it. Now that is in your recipe book, you know how to build it. You still need to find all the materials to do so. And that's the knowledge. Like every time you load in a server after every wipe, all that's wiped, and you go and discover that all again. So
Oh,
there's like a
interesting.
tedious factor to it, so you kind of you relearn the stuff over and over and over, but every time you go to find it, it's never in the same place.
I can second that actually. I've played a lot of Subnautica, and that is also a very familiar type of thing. You need to scan different objects in the environment in order to then craft them, and I very much enjoy that system. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking more structured crafting and structured discovery as opposed to freeform discovery, which was what kind of Connor was talking about before. He doesn't really need any plans, need any blueprint. He just wants that organic. I figured out that putting 2 sticks and 3 iron together in this configuration, which I know is kind of more the Minecraft model, that's how it works. And we've already seen in some of the UI elements that it is a little bit more structured. We've seen from the workbench UI elements that it's like, okay, you need 2 sticks and 3 iron or whatever the heck it was to make a sword. So we know it's a little bit structured. We don't know if that's it though. And that's the kicker,
That's
right?
tough.
That's the question we always go back to. It's like, are they showing us everything? Are they? I guarantee you they're not, right?
Well, so this is the thing with the workbench that they showed off. Like, one thing that I noticed when I was reading that, I'm sure all of you did, was that it specified weapons, right? And it specified that in particular. And that's, when you make a crafting bench, you're not assuming that you can only make weapons, right? So what about all these other items? Are we not able to craft them? Or are there certain other ways that you can do that? Are there certain other benches? There's so many things that they haven't really specifically mentioned or hinted at that it's the surface. We're only just scraping there.
Right. Well, Connor, speaking of benches, sorry, Brandon, really quick. Connor, you played a lot of Terraria, or you're playing Terraria.
Yeah.
So Terraria has, I think I did a little research the other day for one of my videos. It was like 44 workbenches, 44 different workbenches. Is that the right way to go? That's a lot of like, okay, I just need to get to this so I can make this next bench so I can make this more stuff. Is that the right way?
So that's a huge problem that I've had with Terraria. The one thing that's always annoyed me is the fact that you need different workbenches to do all these things, and you need to be close enough to those workbenches for them to have an effect. Right, you have in Terraria, it's quite a structured crafting system. You can see everything you can compared to the workbenches that are in your vicinity. So if you have a very advanced workbench and a loom, and say like some sort of, you can craft like ingots and loom stuff and things like that. And if you move away from them, you can't craft them anymore. So it's about, if you, like you said, have like 100 or 44 or however many it is, how are you going to fit them all in? How can you do all these specific things? How many combinations do you have in a room? It's kind of ridiculous. One thing I noticed in the trailer is they do definitely have different stations for things. You see a cooking station, you see like a spell crafting station, all like very fundamental basics, but how much you can break those down into like further things remains to be seen. But I don't think they push it too far, because again, you want to avoid that whole bloating of the narrative and like bringing that whole too many things to do thing back again. You don't want that element.
If I may present a solution, I do think it is tedious to have something like 40 different crafting apparatuses. If that's what if, right? You could have, I've seen mod packs do this, where you can have a less efficient resource-wise way to craft something. Or if you want to make, say, bulk of that item, you would then make the specialized crafting utility. So, like, if I wanted to make a robe, I could use, if we're talking Minecraft, like maybe 6-hole and be able to sew it together myself right at the crafting bench. Or there could be a sewing machine, like, table or sewing table that would use 4.
Oh, so multiple options to get to the same result.
Yes, exactly. So, like, if I'm cooking, maybe I could grill a piece of meat on top of a fire, and maybe I'd lose some of the material, or maybe it wouldn't be cooked as well. But if I had a skillet and I had like other ingredients like butter and stuff or whatever, I could make like a more hearty meal.
That's one thing that Terraria does well. Like, it has thousands of items, right, that have all been added. So you're not gonna. It's very unlikely that you're gonna find that one you're looking for. So they have multiple that sort of fit the same functionalities. They have some that have sort of ups and downs, but there's ways to achieve those things easier than some, and there's ways to get those items that are similar in functionality than others, and there's methods to get them. So they provide ways, achievable ways to get those things as well, which is interesting.
Right. And one of the things we haven't talked about in terms of crafting, and it, it's a world I'm a little bit familiar with, is more of like a skills-based thing, right? As you do something more often, you get better at it, which may mean, less resources, or it may mean discovering more patterns. It's a very standard thing. We're just talking about very standard things from the video game experiences we've had and trying to piece them into the Hytale world. That's another way to do it, right? Instead of having, a skillet, butter, and onions, you are a level 2 cook or a level 3 cook. So you're rewarded for your endeavors. I like to think, going way back to one of our earlier parts of the conversation, you're going down these different paths, and we were talking about gear and like what's the best gear. If you're, focused on having a house or a farmstead, and you're raising chickens and having a farm like we've seen in the trailer, you would think there'd be some reward or some sort of recognition of you doing that, whether it be in some sort of crafting capacity or some sort of achievement capacity or, cosmetic capacity, or is it just going to be just do what you want? You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that, I'm trying to figure out in my head, like, is if I'm decide I want to just adventure and kill bosses, does that mean that the rest of the game is going to be kind of, am I not going to be able to, am I going to have to start from ground zero when I want to progress down those paths? Or is it just all going to be transferable over? You know what I mean?
That's true. I would definitely support. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, in a lot of progression-based games, you see that thing where you go down one path, like, say if you want to do this, like, special quest or something, and you want to cut corners in the game's progression, you unlock these certain things that are really good items in the game, and then suddenly you have for all those other systems, or you suddenly have an advantageous edge on all those other systems, and you don't have to progress in them like the base game would have allowed you to. Right? Like that sort of variability, like whether you want to see that in farming, crafting, mining, all those different things.
Right. Yeah, because I look at it, I look at this a lot from a PvP standpoint. And what I really like is I don't want a lot of crafting stations, as you mentioned, but I do appreciate when there are enough that you have to structure like a base, okay, in certain kind of resource production, right? And an advantageous way to attack an enemy is you take out certain areas of their production. So it's good to have, in my opinion, like stations that require, you need those to do certain things, because in like a competitive environment, like it works for both the, single player adventure for, you're making a kitchen, you're making a laboratory, like these kind of things, right? But when it comes to PvP, then you have like actual points to actually focus on attacking and taking over and stuff like that, right? And a way that I could see them easily doing that is through an XP system where you can you don't have to do that exact thing to level that up, but your general actions award you XP that you can skill maybe into certain categories, right? And with those things, as you get more in depth into those, maybe doing, making 20 steaks once you've hit a certain level, right? That unlocks maybe a special recipe within that. So maybe there are special things within each of those skills kind of thing that you do once you have experience in those, but you don't lock the player out of any kind of activity based on how they want to play the game. So they can go farm, 100 world bosses, spec that XP into crafting. And when they want to go craft or into building, and when they want to go build, they do this and it's done,
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point that I don't think I've ever asked the question, so I'll ask you guys for your kind of gut reaction thoughts. You mentioned PvP, and you mentioned kind of world PvP elements, right? And that's something that I don't think a lot of people have talked about, or even, it's even come into the conversation. We're on a big server. Say all of us are on a big server, and we, they say we can create and change anything. I build this fantastic structure, somewhere in the world. Are you guys going to be able to come in there and take my stuff? Am I going to be able to lock tiles? Like, what do you guys think that system is going to look like?
That's tough. Yeah, I've been running a survival Minecraft server for years, and that's always a problem, griefing. And yeah, there would have to be some sort of a protection system on large servers like that. Whether or not it's built in, I don't know. I feel like they might leave it open to developers to code a plugin to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But what about like an
an
official
interesting
server,
thought.
right? What about an official server? It's their servers that they're running. I want to go into Biome 2. I want to create something. This again, we're talking about all the complexities of building a game like this.
Yeah.
This is a huge complexity.
I think
I
there's
think,
a huge difference between whatever you set the multiplayer to and whatever the single player abilities of, like joining someone's single player world, right, and making it an instanced multiplayer. If you were to do that, you could run into the situation of, is this person that's just joined my world PvP or PvE? Am I going to be able to fight them or not? One big thing, again, not to bring it back to Terraria again, it just seems that way, but their multiplayer thing is when they join, you can change your flag color in the inventory space, right? And if you're a certain flag color, then only those people with that flag color are on your team, and then you're instantly against all the other people. So if I join the server and I'm team blue, then you can join team blue, and then suddenly my attacks don't hit you and they don't hurt you anymore. But if you join team red, suddenly it's PvP, it's game on. I can attack you now and get your money and stuff.
But what about the
So there's a
crafting
dynamic
element of
there.
that? What if I'm team blue and you're team red, and I find your base? What am I going to be able to do at team red?
It's a good question.
That's it. That's what I'm saying. If I want to play on an official server, I want to be surrounded by thousands of people, but I also want to have the freedom to create. Again, I bring it back to instanced areas, and it sucks because as soon as you start instancing off things, you start to create that isolationism. I want to have a plot of land
Create a bubble.
you create a bubble, and that bubble is very hard to make seamless into the multiplayer sphere, right? I wouldn't want the three of you guys to come to my base and start messing things around unless I somehow, like the flag system, gave you permission to do that. It's complex at so many different levels, and we're obviously again, we make all this content about kind of blog posts and stuff, but there's so many complexities that you can only really unearth by having a conversation with somebody else. You know what I mean?
There's a few things with this conversation that I've been thinking of. For one thing, I would dare say that the official servers won't be survival. I think they would be all minigames. And for that, because the reason why would be, as I said, running a survival server, there's things to discover. And after, say, a month of a world being open, like a good several thousand blocks all the way around the spawn will be used up.
Yep.
And a new player would log in, and without a random teleport button or command, they would have to walk many thousands of blocks just to find their own plot of land.
Yeah.
And I think something as large a scale as an official server just wouldn't be able to effectively do that without simply teleporting everyone millions of blocks away.
Yeah.
So I think survival servers will be their own tiny little communities instead of a big thing.
Yeah.
Left to the creators more so than the actual official developers.
Honestly, I think Hytale's priority is more so being a great platform, more so than a great game. It's going to be a great game, but I think they're actually focusing more on making a platform.
Exactly.
For people
being the seed.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's interesting, one of the...
Also another thing.
Go ahead.
You were talking about speccing points into skills and things, and unfortunately, I did exchange messages with staff, and I think it's going to be like Minecraft in the way that progression is completely item-based. As much as I love my skills and level ups and perks, I do not think that there will be any inherent character traits that can be,
That is going to be
given
such
to a
an
player.
interesting thing because, just based on the weapons that we've seen, granted, we've only seen a small smattering of weapons, like even the legendary weapon, it had some base stats to it. It had some, 2 effects and a little bit of lore. Is that enough to satisfy a player that's used to, 9 different stats, 7 different effects in sets, like I need 6 items, it's that part of the conversation. You're talking about skills. I think there's a large portion of the audience that's, whether or not they're going to happen or not, they want that sort of progression via skills. And I don't know how does you being a farmer, how are you going to reward the player? What are you going to give them, a straw hat and say this makes your watering skill better? You know what I mean? Like, I just wonder how they're going to get through some of the more, I don't want to say mundane, but some of the more common kind of endeavors without a skill-based system? What are they going to give me? A golden hoe? I mean, I know Stardew Valley does something like that. You can upgrade your items, but they also have a very simple skill system tied to it. It's kind of items plus skills. I wonder. I just wonder. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, so the idea of like perhaps skills not being player-based, it might be true that they've hinted that like it's more like not player-based, it's more item-based, right? Like the things that you're collecting, they're the things that are judging that and orchestrating that sort of effect. The things you pick up, the areas you explore, the reputation you gain,
Yeah. But I feel like it has to tie back to either a character or an account some way, right? Because again, you can be exploring and maybe you find some items that increases your, I don't know, your line of sight or something like that, your detection of rare blocks. I don't know what it would be, but again, going back to maybe the crafting element, what are they going to give you? A better apron that speeds up your crafting? Like, yeah, that's cool, I get that, but if it tied more to your sense of progression, and this is what I'm talking about, it's really a character's progression from the moment they load up the first time to where they want to see themselves, where the ultimate goal for them is, not the end game, but where they want to be. They want to be a master blacksmith. If that just means decking out yourself in gear, is that fulfilling enough? Would that be fulfilling enough for you guys? You know what I mean?
It's tough with crafting. At least with mundane things like farming. I had this idea that there should be a redstone-like automation system, but instead of being a physical thing you place down, that it would be more like an enchantment system. So maybe if you've been farming all this time and you decide you want to increase your efficiency, you create a golem. So you put a spell on some rocks or whatever, and it's like this figure that does the farming for you, and it uses up like mana or like, a magical equivalent to electricity. And you could automate these sort of things and be able to do the more mundane tasks, like to upgrade,
right,
by creating automatic ways to do things. I think that would be a nice feature to fill that void of how can I make farming better for myself without having an inherent skill.
Yeah, really thinking outside of the box to kind of create things that that's really hasn't been done. We've seen companion systems and things like that, but creating kind of a new way of approaching farming or a new way of approaching crafting or I say farming, I mean like actual farming, carrots in the ground type farming. I
don't remember who it was. One of your videos, I believe, one of you mentioned a traveling merchant, right? Like that comes in and has like these regular routines or not so regular routines where they appear, and they have their own economy and they come to you depending on what you're selling and different things like that. Would be very interesting.
Yeah,
I think I touched on that with, I think I was talking about Fallout New Vegas, how certain stores, for example, the gun runners, would restock every Wednesday at 7 a.m. And like they had their own and that game did have traveling merchants too, and they had their own economy, and that's things like that.
Yeah, could be really interesting.
That would be a lot of fun too for immersion and having almost like this world that lives on without you. It's like you aren't the center of everything. Like no matter what, they always restock at X time, or like they could
one day you could be on top of the world, right? You could think that you own the world, but the next day the economy could change. A slip between alliances or a race feud could change something right? Interesting dynamics like that, even seasonal changes with how things are, how valuable things are. Like that can alternate the meta. I don't know if the change would be too much and alienate players, but something like that could help, stop things being so repetitive,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe something like a trade route being cut off and something like spices would become much more valuable because you can't get it easily. That would be cool. And then a quest, maybe like an unnamed quest would be like, hey, I want a lot of money. I'm gonna go and walk there myself, get the spices, and bring them back and get a lot of money for it.
Yeah,
guys, should we make a game?
We got a lot of good ideas. All right, so we're coming up on the 1 hour mark. Since we're on these crazy ideas, and I love the crazy idea train, I'm all about it. Let's end with one very, very simple question. Each of you get a chance to answer the question. Livid, you've been quiet for a minute, so I'm going to ask you first.
Okay.
The one thing that you want to see in adventure mode.
See an adventure mode, so you cut out.
Yeah, one thing you
Okay.
want to see in adventure mode.
I really want dynamic and challenging encounters. Like
Elaborate.
in not just the like enemies and bosses, but in the physical dungeons, because they mention, you know, there's like different tiers and stuff within them that we're going to go through, and everyone is kind of unique and instanced. But I don't want it to be as simple as, you know, throw a water bucket down and skate over this kind of thing. Like I want puzzles and stuff like that are really artfully, you know, crafted to the experiences. Like that's what I want. Like I love stuff that not just finding things in the world that I get to collect and stuff like that, but I like things that really challenge people to think outside the box or how they play to do something. Maybe you even go into a dungeon and you don't have, you know, you don't have an item that you need to actually get through that kind of thing, and you have to come back later. Like I want things that are like, you know, you have to go here and you don't have it, so you go back to here, and that ends up taking you to here now to get this, to come back to do this. I would love an experience that's really crafted like that, not just you go in and it's easy to get from point A to point B within like 20 minutes.
Love it.
That's
Brandon,
what I'm
you're
hoping
up.
for.
Cool. I love it. Brandon, you're up. Hit it. One thing you want in adventure
right.
mode.
I made a realization like a month ago, and it's that Minecraft's gotten too easy. And I think Hytale should be difficult. And like, for example, right, I'm a veteran Minecraft player. I started in the alpha stages, like when the Nether was a brand new thing. And one thing that
What
I
were you,
remember,
like 7 years old?
I think I was like 10 to 12. I don't remember.
Oh, damn,
But,
man. This is crazy.
One thing that like I miss from old Minecraft. There's a reason why creepers are so terrifying. And it's because back in the day, you couldn't run. There was no sprint button. If you turned around and there was a creeper right there, you're dead. That's it.
Yeah.
You are dead. And they blended in with the grass. And then there'd be things like lava. And since you couldn't run, you know, one wrong move, you're dying. So I think, and old Minecraft was difficult. There wasn't such a thing as health regen. You had to, like, you instant ate something and it instantly brought your health up. There was no such thing as hunger or sprinting. So I think Hytale, not for, like, you should be able to run. Like, the point I'm trying to make is it should be difficult. There should be, because, for example, like, the whole dynamic of, like, almost all the mobs in the game completely changed when they added sprinting in the combat update, where, you know, skeletons used to be devastating because the knockback they would do would, like, sprinting pretty much negates that completely. And if you're walking, and especially if you're in water, like, you have to retreat. If you're fighting a skeleton in water and you can't run, or like at least swim a little faster, you cannot fight it, and you're forced to retreat. So I think situations like that, where there are times where it's hopeless and you will die, and there's times where it is hopeless and you gotta run away. There should be more of that. It can't just be a cakewalk at all.
I love it. Connor, end it for us.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but being a different race has been confirmed, right?
Correct.
A playable race, okay? So
it is,
one
okay.
thing, I mean, more or less, so we've seen like different races
other
walking
races,
around,
right.
right? And they're definitely a thing that it's a question on the table, if not. But I want to see the ability to change your race. I want to see that affect the way that you approach the game, how you play the game, how you see the game. It may seem a little bit, you know, oh, well, if I want to play the game this way, but I can't be that race because they play a different way. I don't want it to be too exclusive, but I want each race I want to feel like I'm that race, right? I want a meaning to that race. I want to know why I'm playing that race. I want to embody that in all the gameplay aspects.
So you're not just talking about
everything.
like playing an elf means that you pick herbs faster. You want something to change the gameplay because you're playing a different race.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just pick an elf because it has long ears, and the only difference is I have long ears and people call me an elf instead of a human, right? People, you know, change their dialogue because I'm a different race. Like, that's great and all. That's really great attention to detail, especially for a sandbox game that's open world. But I want something more. You know, this game is pushing all these boundaries. Why not push some more with this sort of stuff, right? Like, show me some stuff. Come on.
Show me some stuff. I think that's kind of where we're all at this point. Show me some stuff. Well, guys, I want to thank you, all three of you guys, for joining me on this first crazy adventure. I feel like we're going to have plenty conversations and wild fantasy trips as we get closer and closer to the inevitable beta, whenever the hell that may be. We don't know. We don't care as long as we can keep talking about Hytale. Fingers crossed.
Get it eventually.
What's the new meme? 6/8. It's coming out June 8th. Done. Confirmed. Oh my god. The things people come up with on the Hytale subreddit or unofficial Hytale subreddit is just hilarious.
That post was actually from me.
Oh
But
my god.
It was a okay, I don't believe it, but I just thought it was a great meme. And the original idea was from the Hytale Brazil channel.
Oh my god. It's fine. I mean, look, we are just having the conversation. We'll keep having fun with it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Roundtable. We went off the rails a few times, but that's okay. We will see you guys back here for the next episode. Episode 2, I don't know what we're talking about. Maybe we'll talk about PvP. Maybe we'll talk about crafting. Maybe we'll talk about factions. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But for now, guys, I'm Codiak, TheLividLion, 30Virus, Kweebec Corners. Go check out their channels. Subscribe to their channels. Check out their content. All three of these guys are doing really cool stuff. And obviously join us on the Game Gurus channel. We do some cool stuff too. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.